All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. So happy Friday, folks. This is the last holiday edition grooming we'll have of the year 2018, and so looking forward to making some good progress on sorting, filtering a couple items here from the community on carton checkout, and possibly some new ones on content for those who can help us a bit during the holidays here. And so thank you again, as always, for joining us. We've got everything here lined up in ZenHub for grooming based on some things. And so we're just talking to James before the meeting started. The theme for today is really to pick up some of the things we wanted on the 2.3 release, but had some had some roadblocks, I think, in terms of the API coverage, things like that, where they might be roughed out. We had a really solid UX and design for things like sorting and filtering, but just because of some of those dependencies, didn't quite make the cut. And so the good thing is a lot of it is ready to go. Certainly going to look for someone to help pick that up and drive it through. But Fear that's going to be doing some of these things that we know would be part of any reference storefront, but ultimately are going to be maybe a little bit trickier than some of the other ones we had before. And so that's why we got what appears to be a pretty full house today. And so what I've done is brought back a couple of these items. We've got 360, 361, which is sorting and filtering, respectively. We've got 665, which is the editable cart now that we've got configurable products merged. I do have some items here from Adrian on the mini cart and checkout totals, so some suggestions there. And then we'll start to get into to the ones that are probably a little less groomed, but I do want to get some feedback on to get into some of the content areas. So had a good suggestion from Classy Llama on some explorations on the Shop the Look category page, as well as some other content areas that can potentially be done in parallel, but I'll hold you guys all accountable to keep me honest so that we can do this without necessarily creating any additional overhead along the way. So any questions, comments before we get rolling? All right, let's do this. So number 360. So this is one that we'd originally opened back in October, and the idea here is to bring back the sorting that we once had within the category page for Vedya. And Sami again put together a really nice prototype for this in Envision that we can certainly walk through, but essentially brings back one of the two buttons that we pulled out of 2.3, which is the sort button. Now what we're going to do here is pull up one of the sliders and then allow for sort by a variety of criteria. And so as a shopper, you want to be able to filter and sort products within a category so you can make a purchase on Venue. We've probably all used this in the past, and so the idea here is that we do have some dependencies. At one point when we looked at this and looked beyond MVP, we had some questions on things like server-side rendering. We had some questions on coverage on the API, and we did at one point consider some discovery relative to can this be covered by GraphQL? Maybe not. Hopefully, do we need to fall back to REST? And is there an iterative way to look at this? Maybe start by one or two criteria, and then kind of go on to the other criteria as well. So from a product and UX standpoint, pretty straightforward. But again, I know where we left this off before and marked it as hold. It was around some of that. Around some of those blockers for us to get going, and you'll see this as a dependency for filtering, which we'll talk about next.
I had a note.
Yep.
I've seen on some sites where you apply a stock and the window automatically closes, and it shows it's sort of filtering or sorting in the background. I have consciously refrained from doing that and provided a close button because I think that's I think we should let the user decide. They may, go back and forth. And the other thing I wanted to discuss, and of course this is open to debate. This is just an opinion that I have. The other thing I wanted to discuss was typically sorting is done one at a time. But I can see a possibility of wanting to sort by price, low to high, but ratings high to low at the same time. So you want a highly rated product that's more budget friendly. And that may be an enhancement for the future, or maybe that needs to be a filter. Yep. I don't know. But those are the two sort of questions that I had from a UX standpoint
Makes sense.
I don't know if I can be heard all the way there, but.
The major one, is it server side or is this client side filtering or sorting?
It depends.
Uh,
I think it's up to us, right? And so I think anything on the server side would be preferable. That's kind of that was our stance earlier on
What
that.
is it currently happening?
I love Luma, but I wouldn't necessarily use that as a precedent for.
Sure, I'm
Yeah,
just curious how to
If
do it now.
it's Luma, it's probably the
server side. Pretty much everything is server side.
So it's just a question of what GraphQL supports.
Yep.
We can always knock it.
Cool.
How does pagination work today? Is everything pre-fetched or?
The
That's a good question,
pagination,
actually. Just do
yeah.
that one.
So yeah, some wonderful folks at Bargaining did a pagination PR, and you guys can feel free to speak to it. But there's a disconnect between the pagination that the user performs by moving between pages in the user experience concept and the underlying pagination or like cursing through a collection that the GraphQL API supports, which is right now still a little bit fuzzy. And so I'm Bargreen, please take up arms about what the pagination does and doesn't do that you wanna advocate for change in, but the underlying methodology for paging is something we should be hooking up to Apollo's systems for doing that, which are great at caching and at doing all the proper like boilerplate that exhausts a page set and prevents infinite looping and all that stuff. So we know that there's some delta there, but guys at Bargreen, what is your experience with the paging API?
So let's see. Our coworker Cooper is actually, I think, in here, but he might not have a microphone. So we'll have to look at the chat to see what he says.
Hold on. Oh, okay. You said you think in here. I thought you meant maybe somewhere in that room that we're looking at.
Yeah, good luck finding him.
A lot of earth tones, easy to blend in.
So yeah, Cooper was the one that actually worked on the pagination component, and so we don't have a ton of experience with that, unfortunately, and he happens to not be here right now. So I wish we could speak more to it.
You can do a quick demo if that's helpful.
Oh yeah, that's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Since it's so awesome.
Good job, Cooper.
Thanks, Cooper.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, DevTools, if that's helpful as well.
Yeah, you can feel free to inspect if you'd like. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then if you go to the network tab, you'll see how the GraphQL queries are successively done. We don't need to dive too deeply into this, but basically, for any collection like a products collection, which is probably not going to change during the length of your session, you don't have to do any of the fancy stuff that maybe you hear whispers about how GraphQL iteration ought to be done, like with cursors and whatnot. That's something that makes a lot of sense if you're dealing with like something super live, like Facebook comments, where it may change as you're iterating. But for a product selection, we can just do a simple type of pagination that involves specifying the usual pagination parameters, the page size and the index or the page that you're on, whatever. And that's what this PR does. But the pagination scheme in GraphQL for all of the collections in Magento, I think, while constant, I think that it's a centralized interface. We haven't actually proven that out super hardcore. So I think we should at least do discovery and make sure that the pagination and the way that you kind of count through and deal with collections is consistent throughout the GraphQL API, because if experience is any judge, there may be weirdnesses in it that we need to bring up with the GraphQL team.
I don't know if you see in the chat, it looks like Cooper's chiming in. Says the only reason pagination is implemented the way it was because GraphQL doesn't seem to retrieve the entire category tree at once.
Right. So, Cooper, you want to go on? I feel like if you're paginating through a tree, you would be doing a recursive walk. In this case, what we're getting is, I mean, for the pagination PR that you open, what we're getting is just all of the products that belong to a category, which should be a flat collection of anything that belongs to this or any subcategories. So I'm not totally sure what you mean. But I will say this, we could get deeply into technical detail here. We don't need to. I just wanted to, ask for some confirmation from somebody. Oh, okay, gotcha. So that's a different subject. I want to get confirmation from somebody that it's probably wise to check on the pagination capabilities of GraphQL collections, especially when we do something like changing the size of the collection, which we would do for filtering. Make sure that the page information that comes back with any collection is correct and predictable and reliable. I think that's a discovery point that we need to add to the estimate here.
Okay, very good. Well, as you can see, I'm switching gears here. I want to start capturing some of this in the assumptions. And so I would say I would add certainly that as a task. So James and team kind of keep me honest on what this looks like now. So I think we've got at least a good model around pagination that we can build from. But other than that, what would we want to add in as an assumption? What would we want to add in as a task as we kind of wrap this up and maybe find someone to take a look at it?
Well, the pagination thing we've just surfaced needs to be listed, and the thing that we already did know that is probably the deepest discovery task is finding out what the GraphQL API in the current edge of Magento supports in terms of input types. Trying to think of a way to summarize this. Just say discovery on the capability of GraphQL schema to support variables in filtering and sorting queries. That's what we would call it, because presently it doesn't support them properly. You have to actually edit and recompile a query every time you change these parameters. Because of the way that Magento's GraphQL builds its input objects, it needs to be a proper quote-unquote input type. And last we checked, it isn't. But this is why I would love to have like a Misha or someone else from GraphQL in these groomings most of the time, is it would be great to hear if that's something that they've resolved. Anyway, that's a discovery point, and if it's not something that's fixed, then we need to probably turn the story into a scoping exercise and try to pin it to the delivery date on that stuff from GraphQL, since it's just not feasible to do proper pagination and sorting until that's there.
Okay.
Exactly. That's great. And I mean, rather than pagination work, maybe a better way to say it is on collection filtering variable support.
All right. Sorry, collection
filtering variable support. We can go into a demo so that people aren't completely mystified about what we're talking about, if you'd like. But suffice it to say, if you have a working instance right now, then you can launch your GraphQL playground and go into that get category query to see how it pulls back a product selection. And you can look in the documentation schema tab to see all the ways that you might be able to filter it. And playing around with variables, you'll find that it doesn't do some of the basic stuff we really need. So if anyone has questions about that, I can go further into it with you.
I also have a request. I don't know if it's for this particular issue or for a separate one, but could the current options be reflected back into the URL as well? So
yes.
I was just playing with pagination and I see that like the current page isn't indicated in the URL. So ensuring that we do that for sorting would be great.
Thank you, Rowan. Very good catch. And that's actually something I think deserves to be opened as a bug. That's kind of a judgment call, but I think that not being able to link to a place in a paged collection is not. I mean, it may be okay to go out for MVP, but it's not an acceptable like state to be in. So we definitely need pages to be routed and filter and sort states to be routed. That's a hard requirement of this.
Got it.
And that just means if you copy and paste a link to somebody else, then it'll have all the query parameters necessary to reproduce the sort and filter state and the place you're at in the collection so they can see what you're seeing in some manner of locating a unified resource.
Makes sense. Cool. So I'll add it at least to this one specifically with an eye towards sorting, but to that degree, I think we can set up something in addition to see how that affects things like pagination as well. So it's a larger one.
Sweet.
Cool. All right, just checking the remaining assumptions and tasks here. Most of the assumptions seem to be in play. I think it's still being considered server side. I think we talked about the dependency on collection filtering variables. The task doesn't feel in a lot of discovery, but that's okay, right? So to me, I think the primary output of this is going to be the initial proof of concept that we probably then refine into something that's a bit more hardened. But I think there's, between this is actually fairly related to that. So that's dupe. Depending on that, it feels like there's enough to get started here with what we've got. But keep me honest, is there anything else that's missing? Any other questions, concerns, at least as this being kind of a discovery type of story? Okay, cool. I'll take the silence as complete and utter acceptance. And then, as you guys remember from the demo, we've moved away from estimates. Although those were fun and ideal, starting with the number one, we're now fully Kanban, and so we're going to move away from that and hopefully be breaking these down into bite-sized, just a few day type of pieces for folks to pick up from that. And so we'll skip that one, and hopefully that is not new news. But for those who weren't there at the demo, that's how we are rolling. And so I'll go ahead and add this into ready to start, and we'll go ahead and update this. So. Cool. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. With that in mind, maybe some copying and pasting. This one's going to be a little bit, a little bit more complex, but really builds off of what we just talked about for sorting. So this one is number 361. This is filtering for category. So based on what we just talked about with sorting, again, Sami has done a really nice job talking through and walking us through the prototype for this. And so the filter criteria, again, size, price, brand, color, we've seen a couple of different permutations even on some recent PWA solutions that are out there, but there's definitely the need to look at some discovery work around that based on some of the foundational things we just talked about with sorting. Sorting still needs to be done probably before this, and so we still have this linked as a dependency, but there's a lot to pick from. And now that we have things like configurable products and others that are part of this, I think this is more possible than kind of where we were just a few weeks ago, but is obviously a key part of any browse experience. So just a refresher, as we picked this up and started defining this back in October, very straightforward for anyone who's used filter in the past. As a shopper, you want to filter products within a category so you can make a purchase. These should be based programmatically based on sample vanity data, which is part of this. These attributes, as you see, at least currently in the sample data, include things like fashion, material, style, color, and price. The assumptions are fairly straightforward, although we probably want to copy some of the items or at least reference the ones from sort based on the GraphQL needs there. But that's kind of it. So I'm going to make some of these changes here based on what we just talked about. But while I do that, are there any questions or comments on the filtering?
I have a comment.
Yes. Sami has a comment?
As always.
That's fine.
So I just wanted to call out that if you scroll up a little bit, the UI current design to remove specific filters within a category, like it says size has two filters applied. Yep. The touch area for that is kind of small.
Yep.
Because the height on the actual filtering accordions is rather, it's not that tall.
Yep.
So I do foresee changes coming to that part of the UI. from that, this was sort of out of the full filtering designs that we showed shoppers a while ago. This is the one that kind of resonated the most. So I think it's a safe bet for now, apart from that one thing that's bothering me. But we could always work on that as an improvement, I presume, so it doesn't have to be nailed down.
Got it. I'm capturing it faithfully as an assumption here. So work in progress could be addressed in the future. I think, I agree. I think as we play around with this ourselves, we may find that there's a kink or two from that, but until we actually have that out there, I think it's a really good first step, and it's based on some of the initial research. So that's good.
I mean, it came from shopper request to be able to remove certain filters while retaining others. That was the solution that tested well then, but they were also not, I mean, it was kind of an in-vision test and not on a mobile phone. And so it's not, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a source of truth. So I would like to do some more validation on that.
Yep. Not a problem. All right. Anything else, guys? I'm going to be again just cross-referencing this as we talk through this to what we just did on sorting.
Yeah, I mean, I think there needs to be a root faceting epic, perhaps is the word. Faceting is an old school word, I guess, that I still use to refer to this whole dimension of customizing a collection with filters and sorts, etc., and pages to be what you want to look at. Because the sorting and filtering have so many common dependencies and common questions that you ask to the GraphQL team that, you could copy paste it for now, but I think it makes sense for there to be an underlying epic.
Got it. I like faceting because
there's also opportunity here for sharing of some of the componentry between product options and the product filtering. Yep. Because you're effectively filtering on the options,
Yep.
That'd be nice. We didn't have to duplicate all of the components there.
I attempted to capture this one in at least point number 4. This is getting pretty beefy, but I agree. Any reuse of the components here from the bar green folks would be good.
Does this run into the same fashion color problem, Dylan?
It can. I mean, that's a general problem that this totally will happen to. I think, I think when you're choosing what's capable of filtering, there needs to be some kind of introspection that you do. So yeah, it's definitely gonna involve some of that similar questions. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
We're pretty tied to the venue.
Yep. No problem. Anything else? Any other questions or comments on this one?
In the chat, it looks like there's a question from Adrian just about the filters in the query URL, like in pagination. Would we expect the?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I did my best to shorthand this one with.
Oh, including URL. I see. Okay, got it.
Sorry. Yeah, it is a bit shorthand. So I'll 86 what I had before that and add this.
Okay, thank you.
There is one part which mentions a PR that I submitted, which Jimmy took and then also just merged it in. So that's kind of like old information.
Which one? I'm sorry, Jonathan?
Utilize product options, UIX, components format, PC, Bonzi, and PR.
Yep.
That's old. That's merged in now.
Got it. And so I will probably kind of restate that because I know Jimmy wants to make sure that we encourage reuse on the components.
If possible. It's the UI there.
No, I think it's topical, right? We were just talking about it in Slack the last day or two, right? Where I think people are still trying to understand the difference between venue and the componentry, right? Where the componentry itself is really a big big part of adoption and how this thing grows. And so reuse is a really big piece. We may have to make trade-offs. We have made trade-offs, but the more components we do now, the less we have to worry about in the future. So cool. Anything else in chat? Sorry, I can't switch back and forth very easily without losing folks.
No, Adrian's answered the question. Well, Adrian's gotten the answer he's looking for.
Okay, cool. All right. Actually, speaking of Adrian on this one, this is actually a question to Samia. One of the things I've seen on some of the work that Adrian's done and others is the idea of going between different views, list view versus more of a thumbnail or kind of a grid view. And so I know that's not something we have even envisioned in the past, but it represents a ready-made capability per se. And so I product standpoint, I can't justify the need, but is that something that we've thought about in the past? Is it something we'd be interested in?
Yeah, we actually did have that in some of the early concepts. I don't know enough about how if shoppers and to what extent they would switch between those views on mobile. If the idea is to just keep them scrolling, I would say that the grid view is probably where they would do that.
Yep.
And so the reason I took it out from the earlier designs was we were trying to trim and keep things lean.
Yep.
But I would welcome any data or study that has a good indicator of if that's particularly useful on mobile.
Yep.
And I would say if that doesn't exist, then I don't see that there's enough justification just because it's something that we can do on desktop. I can definitely see that being useful.
Switching between the views like that is like a power user thing. That's why you have it. But at the same time, it's also something to be done with CSS only. So it's like way more trivial than almost any feature we'll talk about here. So if somebody wants to like open a PR that like does that in CSS, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that we really need it, but I could be convinced if there's data.
Yes. No, I'm with Sammy on this one. I think one of the things we need to be sensitive because around is, we're adding a lot of tree ornaments to our gorgeous experience here we have around Venia. And so, for every case that needs to be made, I do think that's a capability that someone would want. So if you look at Venia as the purpose of a reference theme that somebody will want, somebody's going to want it, right? But if the purpose is really a demo that really shows a clean, a clean, simple approach to things, that's another consideration too. We run into this all the time, right? And so maybe opening this to the audience. We've clearly been looking at this and talking about this too much ourselves. Are there any thoughts or is there any data points?
One additional comment. I mean, the Magento way is to say it's going to be useful to someone. Let's put all the bells and whistles on this thing, and we never know how somebody's going to customize it.
Right.
That's fine. That's an approach.
Right.
But I mean, we know that all the bells and whistles, whether it's the store backend or Luma, I mean, there are features that people don't even touch or customize. And so I would argue that, while that is an approach, it's not one that particularly resonates with me.
Yep.
But of course, I mean, I'm not the only voice in the room and fully aware of this.
Well, how about this? Maybe we can ask this question slightly differently, because I think this is going to run into other new experiences, features, components. Would there be any? So, would this be a component, agnostic from Venia? So if you look at a component being useful, independent of Venia, is this one? Would this be considered a component? I think so, but you guys keep me honest on that in terms of the definition.
So yes, it would.
The view. So it's actually a mechanism that was view.
You can absolutely implement this as a view component that has no UI. A great example for this is that there's a popular drop-down library in React by endless self-promoter Kent Dodds called Downshift that effectively is just all of the boring plumbing work of doing a great autocomplete drop-down, but it lets you use render functions to give it all of the pretty stuff, the UI. And that's a great example of the kind of React component work that I think people don't typically associate with React, that, this is just a conceptual component, but that it turns out people really love using. and something that digests all of the GraphQL plumbing and the introspection and options building necessary to just get the data for populating here's how you can filter menu. That's a very great candidate for Peregrine, because Peregrine is it already contains some Magento specific stuff, and really this is just take the GraphQL API that has these features and turn it into a drop down that does this. Totally a great component.
Okay. Well, very good. It sounds like we need to do a little bit of research internally on this one. I just wanted to use this as a forum to kind of talk through that possibility. It will come up. It will be a feature request. It was something will come, but I think I just wanted to pressure test the audience on how that would look, since we were kind of on topic relative to sorting and filtering. So appreciate everybody humoring me on that one.
Sure.
I will follow up as appropriate. Cool. Any other questions before we close this out and mark it as ready to start?
I guess I just had one thought going back to the previous discussion, like building mobile apps and stuff like that. There's certainly you pull in like a list view and just feed it an array, and it'll show that in the UI. So I don't know if that's the direction we kind of want to go with Peregrine. But I guess to answer your question, could it be a component?
We really have to talk about it offline before we start getting people like building.
Yeah. No, there's some interesting cases. I think another one too, which that I do want to explore, is going to be the as we get into product comparison, right? Is that view more valuable or less valuable? And that we just haven't touched the UX for that yet. So cool. Thank you, everybody. All right, so next one. This one's actually, I believe, a Bargreen one. So this one. Yeah, so this is edit cart for configurable products. So what I did was clone a suggestion that was that was brought forth by some of the folks in Bargreen. So now that we've got a configurable carts, configurable products, we also would now want to bring this into a situation where we can edit that in cart as well. So this one's a bit early and ahead of UX, but I think there's an opportunity to do some discovery work where we could potentially make some of those edits based on what we had inside of product details to begin with for that one. So maybe I'll just kick this off to the folks in Fife here. I think it's a good idea. It's something that needs to happen for us to be complete in any respect, especially since it's configurable. Do you guys have any initial thoughts or any thinking around how this might look, or how this might work based on the feature suggestion?
Well, we're not exactly UX designers, but just as far as we can totally reuse a lot of the same components that were obviously in product options, like the color selectors and stuff like that. So it's going to be a lot of reusing, and then basically just bring in the item ID, and then finding a way to this a little bit discovery with GraphQL, just updating the cart like that. After editing an item. But other than that, I don't really have any input on the design. I would love to hear Samya's opinions.
Yeah. At the risk of having her design this one on the fly, I think would it be, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the kind of the how and kind of your thinking on that one. But what we'll probably do is split this up into some just quick work on her end to take a look at this, see how this would to kind of map into what she's done initially, but might be kind of a parallel path that can be done for this relative to what we did with product details. So,
are we talking about the view within the edit item screen?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I mean the design for this exists, and it uses exactly what's on the PD page, because I assume that would probably be easier to implement than something custom for this screen. But yeah, I can absolutely revisit it. Right now, the current implementation doesn't match the design.
Right. So we're kind of in a in-between spot on that one. So if we have the design for this already, this might be a straightforward. Again, if you can help me just I think we want to keep this in here just to show the current state, but then kind of show the proposed in there, and then that way, let me know when that's ready, and then we can mark that one then ready to start.
Could you scroll down a little bit, please?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is what I see on the environment.
Yes.
So okay.
Yes, it actually started off as a bug, but because this is more sophisticated than a break fix, and because we have a couple designs out there, we want to make sure we're doing the right thing. So.
Yeah, I can absolutely pop the screen in there.
Cool. Easy enough.
What is the number? 665.
665, yeah. Cool. All right. So we get a couple other ones here. This one is, I believe this one is Adrian. So this one is for also of a discovery type as well. And so again, this one isn't necessarily leading the UX by any means, and I think opens up a dependency ticket for Sami to kind of think about what the idea around totals, subtotals, and dependencies might look like relative to what's happening here. And so clearly, this is something that happens in most sites. It happens in Luma. That's great, but then the flip side of this, of course, ends up being, how much do we actually put inside of this, and what is a fairly minimal experience. So we don't necessarily have to solve for this one. I'd say from a product standpoint, I think we definitely should have a solve for this in terms of what this should be for Venya, but I do want to make sure that Sami has the time to kind of take a look at this in parallel to the suggestion. So
yeah, this is just a miss on my part. I mean, it's only now that all of this is being scrutinized, and I appreciate the feedback, and it definitely needs a little bit of consideration and work. It's been a while since the screen was initially designed, and it hasn't changed very much because it's only now that implementation on it is ongoing. So yeah, I'll also have a chat with Jimmy here, and I'll update the ticket. And I know that there's another one that Brendan commented on as well that I discussed ad nauseum with Jimmy. So I will respond to all of those.
Cool. That makes sense. Yeah. This one thing, I think you've done a great job at simplifying things. I think we just need to figure out how much we want to show. I don't think we necessarily have to show everything yet.
We shall complexify it.
All right. Adding more ornaments to the tree. Excellent. Let's do one more here. I have a couple other ones that I think would be interesting, but I don't think that they're as juicy as some of the other ones here. This one is. So a couple things. So this idea around some of the CMS content, right? And so I think Artem and others well into the past have started us off on a path with things like sliders, galleries, others. But we're kind of in an in-between state with some of the more interactive content that's out there. And so there's a couple of things that are in flux in review. There's some things that are being built out, and there's some things that need to be added, even in the simple state to places like the homepage, where if you look at that today, it's fairly Spartan compared to the design. And so I think it's probably two things which are, to what degree can we and should we use any of the CMS functionality that we can pull through any of this? And so that's the capability. But then the others, specifically around this, is how do we fully implement and consider the something like the carousel here, which is on the product details page, back to kind of what we looked at this around the original UX design of prototypes. Because if you look at it today, it's rather static. So again, it's an MVP, and so we want to find ways to bring this back to life.
Also, the indicator is not working as
yes.
required.
Yes.
The other, I guess, the thing that I want to point out is the original design had custom images that have a light gray background, and the carousel indicator looks much better in that one. The issue with Venya data is that, or images, is that they all, I think, mostly have a white background. And so I don't know that aesthetically it's working as well, but that's a minor visual miss.
Makes sense.
I mean, I think there's an open PR from Alexia.
There is.
There is. Are there like additional changes that is not included in that PR?
So I believe that if I remember correctly, there was the PR to fix the indicator, but this one is more about having this actually work more like a carousel. I think there's two pieces of that. Yeah. So I guess my question would be: is there enough here for someone to pick up and get started on that? I don't know. I know there's some dependencies. Does this diametrically oppose anything we'd want to consider for a component around such? But we've got a lot of things here, and I just want to kind of elevate this in a grooming session so that we at least have something here that somebody could pick up and maybe start taking a look at, and then add details if we need to. Is there enough here for someone to pick up and start? That's
I think so. There's a lot of questions, but it's hard to anticipate the order that the questions will need asking. Certainly, this is the tip of the iceberg of swipe interactions, and there's a number of different touch libraries that I've experimented with, and per the warnings that I received have been less than efficient, less than performant. So it's big, and we at least know that there's going to be sort of a touch interactions in Peregrine story that's attached to it. But just mindful of the acceptance criteria. I mean, Samya, is there a version of this story that has no touch interactions?
I was gonna say, is touch really on the AC for this? Like,
Yeah.
That was my question to you. Could we start with a version that just involves the tapping the arrow to make the images move and not necessarily swipe?
yeah. I mean, I would deal with touch interactions and libraries for that kind of stuff as like a last touch.
Yeah, I'm not by any means insisting that we have to have swipe right now. I mean, this is literally the first discussion we're having on this. So, yes, Daniel, to answer your question, I mean, the design literally is just the user or the shopper would use the arrows to move back and forth. So if we can start with that and then add the swipe later on as an enhancement, that's absolutely fine by me.
Right, so my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that we have a component, right? We have a component for the images. It accommodates multiple images. It just doesn't have logic for switching the active image, right?
At its core, yes.
Right, and so I believe this is actually already responsive, right? So at desktop, it pulls those thumbnails out into, it pulls those little dots out into images on the side when you have more real estate to actually show them. So we're really just talking about wiring it up, right? I
think so. Yeah, I mean, in the very least, I think wiring it up would be step one. Being able to effectively, paginate somehow. I mean, I think, we come in thinking that everything is equal, but I think if there are situations we need to break this down between click and touch, I think that's fair game too. So.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to suggest that, Samya, you were demanding touch or swipe interactions. I just know that that's going to be sort of an immediate subject of concern about this. This is so far, I think this is the most prominent place where people generally expect there to be a swipe interaction. But that doesn't mean that it's MVP. Jimmy's instinct is right on to cover that as a decoration.
Yeah, I wasn't. I said that because of Jimmy's reaction, not yours.
Yeah, no, Jimmy's reacting to me.
He gets facial expressions.
Yes,
I'm yeah. I can.
Sort of displeased.
Yeah, Jimmy's been sitting with us in Austin here the past week or two. I think he's ready to go back. But it's been great actually having him here and checking some of the nonverbals based on where we go.
Definitely had enough.
He has.
I know.
He has. No, So I appreciate everybody's patience on this, and this has been kind of in product purgatory here for a couple of weeks, and I wanted to wanted us to kind of talk through a little bit of how this would iterate based on the bug that we had, and then kind of where we are in current state, which is okay, but it's not as interactive, even in the most minimal way. So
I think next time I'm going out to Bar Green.
Well, okay. Message taken.
You're so West Coast. And one of these days, we're actually going to pop into Bar Green, almost candid camera style, and just knock on your door at 10 a.m. Central, right in time for grooming, just to surprise you.
That's right.
All right, let's. So that's really what we had to cover today. One of the things I do want to cover probably offline because we got quite a few people on the call, but I do want to start thinking about some really easy, kind of quick content items to bring over from basically old Venya to new Venya. And so for those who haven't seen this yet, and I do want to make sure that I talk to Samya on this one. There's a lot of content in in the old Venia, right? And so if you take a look at this, for those who haven't seen this yet, that's old Venia. It was a concept that was done a couple of years ago, but there's a lot of content on here that is part Luma, part Venia. To be honest, from an MVP standpoint, is probably okay to form as a reference store, but would be good fodder for someone who is looking for a good first issue to start bringing in contact us, customer service, those types of things. Again, not the highest priority, but if you look at parallel and with so many people joining the project, it's a good way to understand our process, how we work, how to make some immediate contributions, and then in parallel, we'll be tackling some of the trickier things together, like sorting and filtering, and we've got some work ahead of us around accounts. And if you look at the roadmap, we also have some work around the commerce, or formerly EE edition, with wish lists and things like that are kind of next in order from a UX standpoint. But there's quite a bit of low-hanging fruit here that I think makes for pretty solid placeholder content, but we want to kind of pull that in, and but also pressure test some of the things that we have around CMS as well. So I'll do some of these offline. I'll spare you guys from watching me type on that one, but I do want to get a couple of these out there, and there are some teams that are probably looking for some things to do while a lot of us will be out for the holidays, either part of next week or certainly the following week as well. So with that, any other questions, or comments before we break?
Yeah, just Bargain's excited to start talking about the migration from like Venia UI components into Peregrine, because that's going to be very useful for us for starting our own website.
Yes, I saw that. You mentioned that in chat, which I have been notably silent in, but yeah, that's a really, really good question, and a great thing to urge us to do. It's worth backlogging. I think that I think we all share the vision of what Peregrine is supposed to be, and we share hopefully kind of a mutual understanding about where we've let that flex a little in order to get feature work done. But the same attitude that led to a React component with no UI in the case of Downshift, this sort of creative desire to separate the cool dev-facing stuff from the merchant-facing skin stuff, like that, we can apply that attitude unilaterally over everything we've made in Venia and go, okay, what part of this is just Venia and its look? The CSS modules, we are importing them directly. Is there a way to get them in here? Just applying that ruthless architectural eye to everything we've implemented in Venia, I think will lead to some immediate stories or suggestions about how to pull things out and begin having the Peregrine concept take shape. I think a root component factory is a great idea. I think having the Magento route handler belong to Peregrine, and the implementations of the actual Magento routes in Peregrine be something that's declarative. I know that these are all kind of vague concepts, but I think laying them out, brainstorming them, and then coming up with the ones that help you and your website first of all, will get some stuff onto the board that we can then prioritize for your guys' sake. I mean, we more than owe it to you. So what is missing in Peregrine that you think should be migrated there from Venia, or you think should just appear in Peregrine so that you can start making your own non-Venia thing?
I mean, anything that a shopping website needs that Venia has, I feel like could be totally added to Peregrine. Like a lot of stuff that we worked on in the past, right?
Yeah. Gosh, yeah, yeah. Basically, any reusable component that could potentially just be applied to and be like a generic thing that we could throw in and then convert to like a bar green style thing. Would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
So how
the reason, like we said in Slack there, we want to get to this real early next year, right? Like I want to start on it in January even. The issue, as you guys all know, with building reusable components or Peregrine components in this case, right, is that they're only valuable if everybody wants to use them.
Right.
If it's something where we build it and it's technically configurable and stylable, but it's a pain to use the API, or you can't really customize it in the ways that you want, and people don't use it, then all it is a negative contribution, right? So we really want to get the Peregrine components right, and the bar is going to be higher for Peregrine components so
Jimmy,
we
I
gotta
feel
figure out-
seen/attacked.
What? No, no. So there's a reason why we only have a handful in there so far. We haven't really tackled them. We've been trying to get stuff that really suits Venia's needs, but all of us are going to have to really focus on the APIs, and we're going to have to pay attention to like Zetlin's talking about what the trends are for building configurable components and how that's going to go in 2019. And then once we like pick a direction to run in, then we'll start running it.
Here's a question. Can I go?
Yes, please go. Sorry.
No worries. How Magento-centric is Paragon going to be?
Okay.
So you can go for that one, but I would say ideally.
Yeah. I think here is the compromise answer to that I think makes sense for everyone. Let's say that Magento is one of a small handful of adapters for a general purpose Paragon PWA library. Have you guys used Valet Plus?
No.
For your locals? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay. Well, Valet Plus is a PHP local handling, like a little bit like Node version manager for running local PHP websites. It was originally built for Laravel. It got adapted into more general purpose framework, but Valet is really something people only use to like run a Magento site or a WordPress site or one of the like major PHP projects. So it has adapters that are this first class concept, and it'll check your folder and say, oh, this is a Magento site. I know how to handle and route to this.
Oh, wow.
In the same way, I think Peregrine is a quote unquote general purpose library. That's not just marketing speak. We want it to include stuff that works on not Magento, but there's probably going to be a whole lot of Magento specific stuff in there that we would just say bundle up into a here are your Magento things type of folder. So it's just an organizational convention. And then that way Peregrine can both have general purpose stuff and Magento specific stuff.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll get either a channel or just a big group DM going in the comments Slack, and we can start fleshing out what it would look like to build Paragon components. We can start talking about that, pretty much right away.
Cool. It's exciting.
Awesome. Yeah, we're excited about that.
Sweet.
Cool.
Very good. Anything else we need to cover before we break? All right. Well, very good. Well, thanks again, everybody. As always, good grooming session. If you guys need anything else, have any questions, you know where to hit us up. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yay.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.